this morning, which was there. It was hard, but God was faithful, and He moved, and she stayed committed. So that's where we find her, and we're listening to the word of Hannah here, and we're like, well, I'm glad you can rejoice. I'm glad that you've got an expectation. You don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what it's been like at my house. Well, I think too many times we see this, that it was we forget that it was her expectation and her commitment that got her to that place. And really, so many times we see mothers, and not just mothers, just people in general. And you can go ahead and admit it. You don't have to raise your hand. We've all done it. We've seen mothers that seem to have it all figured out. We see people that seem to have it all figured out. We see Christians that seem to have it all figured out. They're always worshiping and praising God. They're smiling and glorifying God, and we're going through some junk, and we're like, how can they be smiling? Because you don't know what He's brought them through. See, we see Hannah, and we read these things of Hannah, and we say, man, she's so bubbly. She's so bubbly, she's so happy, she's so excited. Well, Hannah had not been that way before. You don't know what she had to go through, but too many times we see mothers that seem to have it all figured out, and we don't consider what they went through to get to that place. It's really that way with all of us, as I said, but it's Mother's Day, so we're going to stay there on that theme. But we got to go back one chapter. We got to go back to chapter 1 to see what got her to this place. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter to you. I'm just going to recap the first several verses for you. You can go home and read it if you'd like. But in those first several verses, we find a man by the name of Elkanah. I'm not ever naming my kid that, but somebody named him that. Had 2 wives. I would never do that either, but he's got 2 wives. Hannah and Peninnah. I'm just going to call him. She couldn't give Elk more than Peninnah could. She couldn't give him children, but for some reason, we find that he loved Hannah more. I don't know how it goes having 2 wives. I wouldn't want to be in that position, but that was the situation they were in. And he loved Hannah more than her, but he couldn't change Hannah's situation. He felt bad about Elk. He tried to be good. No matter how good of a husband he was, he could not change her situation, no matter how much he tried. Again, we get that this morning. There's some things that we go through. Moms, there's some things that you're going to go through that no matter how much we try, us dads, us husbands cannot change it to her. But the reality was she couldn't fix it. And the other wife wasn't making it any better, just coming at her. So what did Hannah do? She loved her husband, but she understood well that his commitment to her and her commitment to him was not going to change her situation. Sometimes it's not about, we say, well, I'm committed. I'm committed to my husband. I'm committed to my family. And we begin to tell God all of our commitments and what we have done. But that is not going to change your situation. I'm glad Sister Rhonda sung what she sung this morning, because I love that statement in there. She went to her husband, or her husband came to her, and she went on her own resources, but they did not have any experience with this. So what did she do? She went to the temple. She went to the house of God. And she went to talk to one who had a record of getting things done. So though Hannah loved her husband, she knew that he couldn't change the situation, but she knew the one who could make a difference. She was committed. She was committed to him, and she was committed to seeking him until her situation changed. She was committed to praying until she got her answer. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord. Remember that. Then verse 10, and she was in bitterness of soul. This is the same woman who wrote the words of our text comes from. She's rejoicing in the Lord, and she's talking all of these wonderful things. If you saw her in church at this point, she's bubbly and worshiping God. A house is full of people, and she's rejoicing and testifying. But this is her before that. She's by herself. This is not prayer meeting. This is not Sunday morning service. This is not Wednesday night or Sunday night service. Her husband could, as she has bitterness of soul, and as she's weeping sore before the Lord, she doesn't say, Lord, I'm going to give up. She didn't say, Lord, I'm finished. This is over. I can't give him children. I'm out of here. She's better to him than I am because she can give him children. I'm done. That's not what I read from Hannah. It says, and she vowed a vow. That's commitment. In the midst of bitterness, in the midst of heartache, in the midst of brokenness, she vowed a vow to the Lord. She made a commitment to the Lord. And listen to this commitment. And said, O Lord of hosts, if thou indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. Now, as Hannah prayed, church, she laid it all before the Lord. And then she vowed a vow. She made a commitment to the Lord. This amazed me. This is a woman who is barren, who cannot have any children. But when she goes to the Lord, she's very specific in her prayers. She prays for a man-child. She prays for a son. She said, Lord, if you're going to do it, here's how I want it. Here's the request. And so she did that, and she vowed the vow and made the commitment of how she would commit her son to the Lord. And now we remember she was barren. She couldn't have any children, but she was committed. She didn't have a child to commit to the Lord, but she was already committing him to the Lord. Scripture tells us that her womb was closed. The Lord closed her womb, meaning she could not have children. She was barren. But this barren woman committed her child to the Lord. That's commitment. That's seeing things that are not as if they are. She made that commitment there in her bitterness, and she prayed. And her time of prayer was viewed. She was there by herself, but Eli the priest was there too, and he was sitting back and he was watching. And we talked about her being a committed mother. Eli was about to make her a committed mother. You know what I'm saying? He was about to have her committed because he thought that she had lost her ever-loving mind. Let's look. Verse 12. It says, it came to pass as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli marked her mouth. He's watching her. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice didn't run around and do whatever they want to do. He don't know nothing about commitment. The light's about to go out in the house of God, and God was sending his answer right there with Hannah because it would be her son that would turn the light back on. That's a message in itself. But Eli looks, and what's she doing? All right, it's time for me to call the police because this drunk woman's trying to come in here. And she said, no, that's not the case. That's not the case. Verse 15, Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I'm a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken hitherto. She understood something that we all need to get a hold of. Mothers, and every one of us need to get a hold of this morning as Christians. Expecting is necessary. Expectation is necessary. Commitment pays off, and prayer works. We don't have to look any further than this story this morning to understand those three things. Expectation is necessary, commitment pays off, and prayer works. Hannah is a great example of that. It didn't matter what Eli thought of her. It didn't matter what anybody else thought of her.